For most people, Sun Tzu is a name associated with battlefields, generals, and strategy quotes shared by entrepreneurs who have never actually read him. He is treated as the philosopher of victory, a mystical thinker who decoded the psychology of conflict. But this modern portrayal completely misses the point. Because when you strip away the slogans and the mythology, you encounter something far more interesting. Sun Tzu was not obsessed with winning wars. He was obsessed with avoiding them. He was not concerned with glory, discipline, or domination. He was concerned with cost. And in a world that was wounding itself through endless warfare, Sun Tzu became the thinker who clarified one uncomfortable truth for the first time. For a state, the greatest danger is not the enemy it faces. It is the bill that comes due after the war. Welcome to Financial History Archive, where money, power, and history intersect. And nothing is ever as simple as it seems. To understand Sun Tzu's financial intelligence, we must look at the era in which he lived. His ideas did not appear in a vacuum. They were born inside a crumbling world driven by its own ambitions. Late spring and autumn China and the early Warring States period, roughly the 6th and 5th centuries BCE, were defined by fragmented kingdoms, each convinced it would unify the world and willing to burn through silver and gold to try. Warfare had become constant. Alliances formed and collapsed. Armies grew larger with each passing decade, evolving from aristocratic chariot duels into massive infantry mobilizations requiring food, metal, supply chains, and taxation on a scale previous generations could not have imagined. States were not merely fighting. They were stress-testing their economies at multiple scales. Western audiences often think of ancient warfare in terms of tactics and heroism. But in this era, war was first and foremost logistics. The moment an army moved, the clock began ticking. Carts, grain, horses, craftsmen, armorers, cooks, blacksmiths, porters, someone had to feed them or pay them. A campaign lasting a few months could bankrupt a small state. A campaign lasting a year could destabilize even a large one. And yet these kingdoms, trapped in cycles of insecurity, could not stop fighting, even when they understood the cost. What we now call an arms race had not yet been named, but it was already underway, pushing the entire political system toward collapse. This was the world Sun Tzu inhabited, not as a quiet philosopher in meditation, but as a strategist confronting what appeared to be a military problem that was, in reality, an economic crisis. In the West, we romanticize him as an ancient CEO whisperer. In truth, he was closer to a risk manager. He looked at numbers, costs, timelines, and logistics and recognized that the way states were conducting war was financially unsustainable. If the treasury collapsed, victory meant nothing. Many rulers never grasped this. For them, the greatest threat was the enemy army. For Sun Tzu, the greatest threat was their own expenditure. That is why the most important line in The Art of War begins, "War is a matter of vital importance to the state." Not glorious, not honorable, vital, meaning dangerous, destabilizing, and capable of destroying the very society it claims to defend. Even his most famous ideas are disguised economic principles. When he says, "The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting," this is not mysticism. It is cost avoidance. It is the ancient equivalent of achieving your objective without burning capital. When he warns that no nation has ever benefited from prolonged warfare, he is stating a literal economic fact. The longer a campaign continues, the weaker the state's capacity to function becomes. This is why he emphasizes speed, efficiency, intelligence gathering, and psychological pressure. These are cheaper tools than armies. Sun Tzu did not want to win wars for glory. He wanted to prevent states from bankrupting themselves in the pursuit of victory. To grasp how revolutionary this thinking was, we must remember what Chinese warfare looked like before him. For centuries, aristocratic elites engaged in ritualized combat where honor mattered more than outcomes, and economic cost was barely calculated. But as populations grew and weapons evolved, the scale of war transformed beyond recognition. States began stabilizing currency, reforming taxation systems, and building bureaucracies simply to sustain their armies. War became a national project and an existential financial risk. Sun Tzu saw that the old mentality had become suicidal. War could no longer be a stage for noble gestures or symbolic victories. It had become a budgetary threat demanding cold, dispassionate analysis. This is what makes Sun Tzu an anomaly in world history. While most military thinkers glorified conflict, he viewed war like a balance sheet. He calculated supply chains, resource depletion, and opportunity cost, centuries before those terms existed. He had no patience for generals who pursued fame at the expense of stability, because he understood something modern leaders often forget. Every battlefield decision is ultimately a decision about national solvency. Miscalculate, and you do not just lose soldiers. You lose the state. When you read The Art of War through this economic lens, the book begins to sound less like ancient poetry and more like a spreadsheet. Sun Tzu opens his treatise by listing 5 fundamental factors that determine the outcome of war. Beneath the philosophical language lies a simple reality. These are cost variables. Moral law, heaven, earth, the commander, method, and discipline. These are not mystical categories. They are resource management categories. He asks, what will this war require? How stable is the state? How resilient is the population? How efficiently can you move? How disciplined is your administration? Before the phrase risk assessment existed, he was already conducting one. And from the very first pages, he makes it clear, leaders who cannot calculate cost have no right to calculate strategy. This is why much of the book focuses not on heroism, but on logistics. Sun Tzu devotes an entire section to the economics of feeding an army. The logic is ruthless. When an army travels far from home, the cost multiplies. Distance increases expense. Long distance compounds it exponentially. Transporting supplies drains the treasury faster than paying soldiers. Keeping an army in the field damages the agricultural labor base. Wasteful commanders may win meaningless engagements while driving their nations toward insolvency. For a military treatise, he is curiously uninterested in combat itself and almost obsessed with what the war is costing. He advises using the enemy's resources whenever possible, not as a clever trick, but as a financial necessity. He criticizes leaders who prolong campaigns not because of indecision, but because of fiscal recklessness. Here, Sun Tzu grasped something modern states still forget. Logistics does not support strategy. Logistics is strategy. His approach to intelligence follows the same financial logic. Today, governments debate surveillance budgets in terms of security and ethics. Sun Tzu framed it as cost efficiency. A single spy can prevent an entire army from marching in the wrong direction. A single intercepted message can save a nation millions. What enables the wise sovereign and the good general to strike and conquer is foreknowledge, he writes, not courage or brute force. Foreknowledge was the ancient world's word for data. Sun Tzu understood earlier than anyone that misallocating information is misallocating capital. Even his emphasis on speed is fundamentally economic. Speed is the essence of war, he writes. Many interpret this as aggression. But at its core, speed reduces cost. Every day an army marches, feeds itself, or waits increases financial exposure. A delayed victory is money burned. A victory achieved through maneuver rather than attrition preserves resources. His focus on flexibility, adaptation, and psychological superiority is not philosophical decoration. It is fiscal discipline. His deepest financial insight is woven into the structure of the book itself. Every line concerns opportunity cost. Every choice a ruler makes closes the door on a cheaper alternative. Sun Tzu was not anti-war. He was anti-waste. The greatest waste, in his view, was fighting wars that did not need to be fought. That is why he praises generals who break resistance without bloodshed, through diplomacy, intimidation, deception, alliances. For Sun Tzu, these are not secondary strategies. They are primary strategies, because they preserve the state's limited capital. His financial genius becomes even clearer when we examine the states that listened to him, and those that did not. Some kingdoms poured their wealth into prolonged sieges, eroded their tax bases, and became vulnerable to internal revolt. Others applied Sun Tzu's logic: intelligence, alliances, rapid strikes, and avoidance of long economic spirals. The states that treated war as a rare and strategic financial instrument survived longer. Those that treated it as a display of brute strength exhausted themselves. Sun Tzu was not only theoretically correct. History validated him in practice. And this is where the story shifts from ancient analysis to modern relevance. The uncomfortable truth is that Sun Tzu's warnings echo in every major conflict of the last 2 centuries. Modern governments still make the mistake he tried to prevent, entering wars without calculating their long-term economic burden. Then they watch their budgets fracture. The Soviet Union in Afghanistan, the United States in Vietnam, the empires of World War I. These conflicts were not lost because armies were weak. They were lost because the economic model behind them collapsed. Sun Tzu would have recognized the pattern instantly. Prolonged war corrodes the state from within before the enemy ever does. The tools he advocated, intelligence, deception, targeted operations, rapid maneuver, have become the foundation of modern strategy precisely because they are cheaper. Cyber warfare is Sun Tzu. Sanctions are Sun Tzu. Proxy wars, covert influence operations, strategic deterrence, all aim to maximize impact while minimizing financial risk. The world's most powerful states still operate within Sun Tzu's balance sheet, whether they admit it or not. Today, we see his influence most clearly in how states define national power. For Sun Tzu, power did not derive solely from the army. It derived from economic resilience, the ability to absorb shocks, recover, and continue functioning. In an age when kingdoms collapsed from overspending on unsustainable campaigns, we face the same dilemma in different clothing: military budgets, debt burdens, resource dependencies, fragile supply chains, and the long-term cost of projecting power. Sun Tzu may not have known modern technology, but he understood mathematics. The lesson most people miss is this: Sun Tzu was not teaching rulers how to win wars. He was teaching them how to avoid national bankruptcy. His true genius lay in recognizing that the cost of conflict outlives the conflict itself. States do not collapse because they lose wars. They collapse because they exhaust the capital that keeps them cohesive and functional. In Sun Tzu's world, if the treasury falls, victory is irrelevant. The best war is the one that does not require repairing your economy afterward. Viewed through this lens, the art of war becomes something entirely different. It is not a book about aggression. It is a book about restraint. Not about crushing the opponent, but about outlasting them without eroding yourself. Sun Tzu does not glorify victory. He glorifies stability. The ruler who preserves resources is wiser than the one who captures cities. The general who wins without fighting is wiser than the one who annihilates armies. The state that knows when not to act is stronger than the one that acts out of pride. Ultimately, Sun Tzu's financial genius lies in his refusal to separate economics from power. He understood they are inseparable, that war is the most expensive policy decision a state can make, and that a ruler who miscalculates its cost signs his own death warrant. His message is simple, unsettling, and eternally relevant. Power is not measured by how hard you strike. It is measured by how well you can absorb being struck. And history shows that when financial systems collide, the winner is not the bravest nation. It is the most economically disciplined one. History does not repeat itself, but it marches. And if you fail to understand it, you will pay the price again. If this gave you a new perspective, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. History speaks. Those who listen win. Stay well.